Welcome to the Old Guy AI podcast, brought to you by MongoDB. And now, here's Scott Sanchez and Pete Johnson.
Hello there. I'm Pete Johnson. With me, as always, my good friend Scott Sanchez. And Scott, when I was on vacation last week and we didn't record, I didn't miss any headline grabbing, short on details announcement from our friends at OpenAI, did I?
No, they have nothing going on really over the past couple of weeks. No billion-dollar deals for sure. Trillion-dollar deals though, it's a whole different story.
Ah, that's right. That's right. In fact, so this is true story. I exited on Monday. I was at Epic Universe, the brand new theme park in Orlando, and I was checking my regular news sources when I got off the Mario Kart ride, which is excellent, by the way. And when I found this story that everybody was talking about earlier in the week, and I believe what I sent you in Slack was, what the hell is this?
That's accurate.
Okay, let me read a couple of headlines and then let's react. And then we've got a second topic I think we're more interested in anyway. So this is I'm going to take some text here from the CNBC article on this that was published Monday. OpenAI and Advanced Micro Devices have reached a deal that could see Sam Altman's company take 10% stake in the chip maker. OpenAI will deploy 6 gigawatts of AMD's Instinct graphics processing units over multiple years and across multiple generations of hardware, the companies said Monday. It will kick off with an initial 1 gigawatt rollout of chips in the second half of 2026. A little bit later in that article, it says, as part of the tie-up, AMD has issued OpenAI a warrant of up to 160 million shares of AMD common stock, with vesting milestones tied to both deployment volume and AMD's share price. And my favorite sentence in the CNBC article is, the ChatGPT maker said the deal was worth billions, but declined to disclose a specific dollar amount. Reaction.
I love that they described them as the ChatGPT maker.
Yeah, I like that too, actually.
Before we dive a little bit more into that, I think we need to start describing them not as the ChatGPT maker, but as like the AI platform company, because all the stuff from their dev day, OpenAI just seems to want to bring more and more of all the things happening around the LLM right now. They want to bring that in, the agent kit and the SDKs and all the stuff that they're doing now. It's like, don't run this externally and reference back to the LLM. Actually do this inside of our platform. And so I think the path that they're on is becoming more clear, from sort of the developer and enterprise use case. And it's gonna be an interesting next 6 months.
Run everything on us. Trust us. That'll work out.
Yeah. There's still that problem of like, hey, do people actually want to put all their data in the LLM, or do they want, I don't know, let's say a world-class database to store it in? Seems like that problem's not going to be an easy one for them to solve.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we've talked before, like I much prefer Anthropic's strategy here of focusing on specific use cases and on specific audiences rather than continuing to go broader and broader and broader, which seems to be OpenAI's strategy. And, during the last recording, I said I've lost interest in announcements like this, and that didn't change while I was on a cruise ship and in theme parks in Orlando. Like, I don't. So, Scott, if I give you my house and then I give you my car, why does my stock price go up? I don't understand. I understand the math behind this deal at all.
Potential, Pete, potential. I'd also like 10% of all of your future earnings that you will use to buy your new house. Thank you.
I mean, that's fair. So when I texted you this, I was in a very weird place because I'd just gotten off a, brand new theme park ride. And I thought, like, the next place this has to go is naming rights. Like, I want naming rights for the data centers, and I want naming rights for the nuclear power and for the cooling. Like, I want CNBC to be forced to say something like the DraftKings data center which trains ChatGPT, cooled by Diet Dr. Pepper, nuclear power by Spirit Airlines. Like, that's what I want to see next.
I don't know how great I would feel about the Spirit Airlines nuclear reactor. Would they paint it yellow?
I needed a couple of Coke Zeros to come up with that one. The Spirit Airlines was the last piece, Lego piece in that sculpture as I was thinking about this in Epic Universe.
Well, I'm glad you had so much time to think all this stuff up. So anyway, back to our AMD friends. I think this is a good deal for them, actually. Despite having to give up 10% of the company, I think it brings them back into modern relevancy in a meaningful way. It generates years worth of performance obligations in terms of them having to deliver. See what I did there? Deliver chips.
You almost said revenue, and I was about to stop you.
I don't want to say revenue. Performance obligations, and I don't know. I think it's a good deal for them. It feels similarly. Is rescue-y a word? I'm gonna call rescue-y. It feels similarly rescue-y as the Intel deal did recently. And I don't know, like it's encouraging to see giant players like OpenAI, ChatGPT maker OpenAI. It's encouraging to see them diversifying a bit. Like I do kind of worry that we as an industry are putting so many of our eggs in the NVIDIA basket. And, like if no one else is getting funded to go innovate, are we just sort of beholden to whatever Jensen decides to give us? I hope not. So, you see folks like Google and Microsoft and Amazon investing, but it's more for their own use. AMD is sort of, one of the other incumbents out there who has the potential to be innovative again. And I hope that, big infusions like this of both cash and relevancy help them become a formidable competitor. Not because I don't want to see NVIDIA succeed. I want to see a whole bunch of people succeed. And the more competition we have, the better our AI-powered future is going to be.
Well, our cycle just got more complicated, right? The ownership cycle, because we had OpenAI spending $300 billion on Oracle, and then Oracle buying chips from NVIDIA, and NVIDIA investing $100 billion in OpenAI. But now we also have NVIDIA investing directly in Intel, and by the proxy of OpenAI, we now have NVIDIA investing in AMD. So if Jensen owns 4% of Intel now, what percent does he have of AMD too?
We might need to ask ChatGPT to create us a cap table family tree to help us actually understand who owns what of what. Someone's probably already done this. It's probably on X. We just need to go look for it. Let's not forget that as tax-paying U.S. citizens, we also own some of Intel.
That's right. I forgot that. That makes the family tree even more complicated. Mm-hmm. So there's a second topic that we want to discuss a little bit more that we're both interested in that dropped. We last recorded on a Wednesday. This happened to drop that Thursday evening, and that was GDPVal, which is the new evaluation criteria that our friends at OpenAI put together. So I dug in on this yesterday when I got back, and there's kind of three levels to this. There's the blog article, there's the white paper upon which the blog article is based, and then they also dropped some data out on Hugging Face that you can look through that they used as part of the evaluation.
I did put a community post out on our channel and on my LinkedIn last week about GDPVal and how even though um, GPT, even though Claude beat it in a lot of ways, I was impressed that OpenAI still put out the data.
Yeah, so was I. There was a couple of things I liked about this, and there was a couple of things I didn't like about it, and that was probably my favorite. That even though they didn't score the highest, um, they published the results anyway. So if you haven't seen this, I'll put it on screen now, and I'll describe it. I'll describe it verbally if you're not watching on video. So sort of the glory diagram that they have in the blog article has on its y-axis the win percentage that each of the LLMs had, with 50% parity being more than industry expert. I'll explain what that means here in a second. And then along the x-axis, it's a vertical bar chart, and the x-axis has the different models. So like GPT-4o did like 12.4, one or tied 12.4% of the time. Grok was 24.3. Gemini 2.5 Pro was 25.5. O4 Mini high was 27.9. O3 high was 34.1. GPT-5 high was 38.8. And sort of the winner, I would say, of this first round of this evaluation was Claude Opus 4.1, which won or tied 47.6% of the time. So that's a mouthful, but let me explain what this means. So what they did...
hang on, I'd love to do this again with Claude 4.5, because like they were comparing GPT-5 and Gemini 2.5 with like the previous gen of Claude, and so I'd love to see what Claude 4.5 does on this, if it just clobbers it. Like it's already clobbering it. But anyway, sorry, please continue.
Well, I'd like to think this is an iteration. Like I said, there's some things I think they did really well with this evaluation, and there's some things that if you dig down, I wish they'd done a little bit differently, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's set the stage here, because it's actually a pretty complex set of evaluations they did. So the way that they did this was they used Bureau of Labor Statistics information from the U.S. government across 9 different sectors of the economy, 44 occupations across those 9 sectors. Those 9 sectors represent about 5% of U.S. GDP. The occupations in the set of 44 represent about $3 trillion in annual wages and compensation. And let's pause there for a second, because in previous episodes of this podcast, we've talked about what do we think the total addressable market is for our friends at OpenAI. They just told us what the floor is. They think the floor is the $3 trillion to replace the wages and compensation of these 44 occupations. Did you read that differently, or would you agree with that statement?
I think if you assume full replacement, yes, but let's also put that number in context. Like we're talking millions of jobs, but it's also only like 2/3 the current valuation of NVIDIA.
Those are good perspectives. So that's why I called it a floor, because as we'll get to in a minute, I don't know that we're talking about full replacements, but and again, it's the TAM. It's not necessarily what they're going to pull in. So out of those 44 occupations, they hired experts with at least 14 years experience across each one of those 44 occupations. And they had those people generate a list of tasks. It was 30 tasks per occupation. And that's what they started with. They whittled that down to 220, or 5 per occupation. And then what they did for each of those 5 was they basically did a Turing test for each one, where they had a human being who was about 14 years expert in that field produce some output given a prompt, and then they had each LLM do the same. Then they had a human evaluator look at the output and say which one was better. And that's how they generated the wins versus the ties. So those numbers that I just rattled off a minute ago that went as low as 12.4%, that's wins or ties across those 220 tasks. And that's what GPT-4o did, to a high of Claude Opus 4.1 getting 47 point, what is it, 6%. So so the graph looks simple, and I think this is if you don't know the detail that I just rattled off, it makes it look like Opus 4.1 is about ready to be AGI for 44 occupations, and that's not exactly true. So one of the things I didn't like about this was, the devil's in the details here. They didn't talk about, out of those 1,320 tasks, what percentage of all the tasks of that job is it? How do they whittle down between the 1,320 and the 220? Doesn't say anywhere in the white paper how they made that decision. So that's where they're putting their thumb on the scale just a little bit, I suspect. So it's not about total replacement, but it's about, here's common tasks for these jobs, and here's how AI can potentially solve some of them. They called those 220 in the white paper, they call it the golden subset. And that's what they published on Hugging Face, was details of each of those had a prompt, and each of them had content that went along with it. So for example, one of them was a solutions architect, which is a job that I've had. And if you go look at that, there was a diagram that showed a 3-tier web application and a short text description that talked about the different tiers in that 3-tier web application. And the task, or the prompt, was take this on-prem architecture and what would be the steps to migrate it to Google. That's what the task was. So like I said, the devil's in the details here. When you took a look, well, I guess first let me ask, did you look at the white paper, or did you stay on the blog article?
I know what you think I did, but I'm going to surprise you and tell you that I actually looked at the white paper. I didn't read the whole white paper because, I knew you would. But, no, I was so impressed by the concept they were alluding to in the blog post that I was like, I want to look at this a little bit deeper. I don't know that I pulled out the nuance of the golden, that they sort of cherry picked the 200 things that they feel are the golden set. But even if that's the case, and those represent, if you think about most jobs, there's like a handful of tasks that really represent the majority of what you spend your time on. And then there's a long tail of things that pop up that sort of round out your day or your week or your month. And so I would hope that with the help of the experts, they identified those 200, as opposed to like, here's the 200 we win the most on, right? And I don't know if
we don't know that yet. So like I said, I think this will be an iterative process, or at least I hope it will. I think it's a good goal, and I think it's a good first take. But that's among the things that I would like to see in the next iteration, is how did you make that determination to go, like, which of the 220, why did they make it, and the other, 1,100, what is it about those 1,100 that got them kicked out? I would want to know the answer to that. So I very much like that, like you said before, that they published a paper when their model didn't necessarily perform the best on it. I thought that was admirable. I loved that the range of occupations was as broad as it was across the 9 different sectors. And I loved that they sort of used it to reveal sort of that floor on the TAM. I didn't like that they use that glory diagram to make it seem like AGI is already here for some of these professions. I didn't like, and I posted this on LinkedIn, out of all the citations, they got 2 pages of citations. Alan Turing is not one of them. And that bugged me, because the 2 people most responsible for this industry right now, I think you know this about the one, Woz and Turing. Like, without those 2 guys, we don't have this industry. And it would have taken 30 seconds to put the right citation, that they're basically using an evaluation criteria similar to the Turing test to make these criterias. And the last thing I didn't like was there was a diagram figure 7 in the white paper, they could have highlighted AI assisted cost and speed improvements. Instead, they made it look like, hey, AI is coming for your job. And if you're in this occupation, you're already in trouble. But instead, there's a diagram that showed cost improvement and speed improvement. There was a set of tests they ran where the expert was given the instruction, try n times, and if still unsatisfying, fix it yourself. So use AI to try to accomplish this task in concert with you, human in the loop. How much faster and what kind of speed improvement and what kind of cost improvements you get. I think that's a way better message for them than AGI is coming for your job, but it's AI is going to help you do your job faster and less costly. I think it's a way better message.
I agree. I still would have liked to see what is the comparative cost of answering this problem with the LLM versus take the computed, they already used government data for these roles, use the government data for the average compensation per hour for these people, and they spent 15 minutes on it, they make $100 an hour. This costs $25 to have a human do it. It cost 80 cents worth of prompts to do it on the LLM, and it took it 1 minute, right? I don't know, I'm making those numbers up, but they're 90% of the way there. They could have given us some perspective on actual cost and cost comparison, because that will drive whether or not a company, an organization, a government, whatever it is, wants to invest in the AI to go do it. Right? This stuff's not free. You still have to build it. You still have to implement it. You still have, the reality of running your organization.
Yeah, it's missing the ROI calculator. One of the things that helped AWS take off, right, was, hey, go take this inventory of what your VMware estate looks like, take the resulting CSV, put it in this tool, and we're going to tell you what the 18-month migration cost is, and then what the running cost is thereafter. And it was, a very cool ROI tool that made it way easier to make that cloud migration argument to senior leadership. And I agree. I think a later iteration of this should have something like that. Again, I think it was a great first swing at this. They're not going to get it perfect the first time, but yeah, I like that idea of the calculator. And like I said, I like this idea of focusing on the benefit to the human, not as the replacement of the human, because just way too many people are way too scared about the Skynet of this.
Yeah. It reminds me that there's a talk I used to give in the early days of cloud that per unit cloud, compute, EC2 storage, whatever back then, will be cheaper than what it costs most people to do in their own data center, right? If I'm running your example, if I'm running VMware on-prem, I got to buy the servers, I got to get the space, I got to get the people, I got to get the power, I got to get the pipe. It's going to cost you more per unit in your own data center than it would in the cloud. However, if you are doing cloud right, over time, you should be spending more money on compute and storage in the cloud because you figured out how to put it to use to really grow your business or really change what you're doing. And I think this will be the same. Is per unit, this capacity of the LLM will cost you much less than the equivalent human. And that's probably true now and will become more and more true over time. But if you're doing it right, you might want to think about, this isn't how much less can I spend to run my business. That's the short-sighted view. It would be, how can I put this technology to use and hopefully be paying more in 5 years than I'm paying now for all these equivalent human hours, because I've 100x'd my business and my opportunity leveraging this technology. And there's still going to be humans, just like there's still data centers. There's still plenty of data centers and servers that get sold and people who manage them. But I think it's a very similar talk track to me. It's yes, you might spend 80 cents on the LLM to have something that costs $80 to have a human do, and you can do it in seconds instead of days or hours. But if you think about how do I multiply that by 1,000 in a way that like you can't really easily do with people, now you've got really interesting things you can do. And maybe your OpenAI bill in 5 years is more than your payroll is today, but your business isn't 20% more like your bill is. Your business is 20x more.
Yeah, it's the Jevons paradox of that, right? Like you can choose to think of it as I'm going to spend 5x less or whatever the multiplier is. I'm going to choose to spend less, but that human capital is still valuable. You could use that human capital to go do things above and beyond. I mean, I'll use an example here from yesterday. So, I mean, we don't talk about it a lot on the podcast, but you're my boss, like you, right? And yesterday, another leader in our company asked me to analyze a particular submarket. And in the old days, what the first thing I would have done was go to Google search, and I would have pulled a bunch of metrics about the different companies in that market and the different attributes that were leading indicators. And in this case, it was things like, how many mostly startups in this market, how many funding rounds have they had, what's their total amount accumulated, like what's their head count, what's their approximate valuation, and then things like GitHub stars and downloads and those sorts of things. And it probably would have taken me 3 hours to pull all that given the size of the market. And I had Claude Desktop pull that information for me in about 20 minutes because it didn't do it right the first time. I had to give it some additional information, and I had it produce a report, and then I had Gemini check the accuracy of that report for me, and then I had Gemini produce a Google Sheets table for me, which I then inserted into a G Slides, and I confirmed that all the data sources were what they were, and that gave me my raw data. And again, that would have taken me probably 3-4 hours manually. It took me 1 with AI assisted. And then when I sent it to this other leader, I could then add, okay, here's the raw data and here's what I think it means. And it's the here's what I think it means part that AI will struggle to do to the level that a human will. So using this example we were just talking about, something that would have taken me 4 or 5 hours yesterday took me an hour and a half. And I don't think you want to fire me for the resulting other time that generated for me. I moved on to other tasks, and I was able to get more throughput out of my day as a result of that.
I think any leader who is not encouraging their teams to make use of the tools to do exactly that, to make them better at their job, is not thinking about the opportunity correctly. And the challenge comes in adoption on this of some people will go too far, and they will just take whatever slop comes out of the AI. They'll say like, oh, cool, it made me a spreadsheet and some Google Slides. I'm going to send this to them and call it done. And then someone will be like, this sucks. And, AI will get a bad reputation. Whoever gave them that work will get a bad reputation. So, if you just hand off what the AI does, at least with today's technology, someone's going to be disappointed along the way, either with the technology, with the employee doing that kind of work, or both. But I think your approach is the right one for these types of things that aren't so cut and dry, where it's an assistance tool. And I think some people use it that way. Some people are still afraid to use it. Like I've talked to people, very smart people recently, who are like, I don't like using it because my special skill is that I'm really good at making sense of all this complicated stuff, and I feel like if I use it, then I'm diluting my own skill, or I'm putting myself out of a job or something. And it's like, no, like, be like Pete. where you're using your skills and you're letting it buy you more time. Like, you saved hours that you could then use to actually be smarter about this. And I think you sort of have people on both sides of that right now, where some people are just like, put in my prompt, give me a thing, cool, I'm done with my work. This is very mediocre, and off we go to the next thing. And then there's people who are brilliant that still would rather like do almost all of it themselves for fear of diluting their brand or their own perceived value. But the folks that are getting ahead are somewhere in the middle.
It somehow reminds me of so I graduated college in '93 and started working in HPIT immediately, and not everybody had internet access. You had intranet access, but not everybody had internet access. And the reason they gave us essentially was because, well, if we give everybody internet access, then you're going to spend all day looking at sports scores and porn. Like, you're not going to do your job, right? But what ended up happening is when you opened that up, people's productivity shot up because now suddenly they had access to all the world's information, and the nature of the jobs changed pretty significantly. And I get it for those that sort of still have the fear factor and want to do it all themselves. And I don't think that's right, and I don't think the other extreme. I'm trying to, at least in my own personal stuff, I'm trying to split the difference here. I didn't just trust what I got back from Claude Desktop. I asked Gemini to check me, and then the thing that popped out of that, I then checked it manually myself before I go send it to a leader that can get me fired if I screw up, right? So there's a middle path here where, and that's why to go back and sort of conclude on the GDPVal, that's why I wish they would focus on the human improvements and not the human replacements, is to encourage both extremes to meet in the middle, that there is a cost efficiency and there is a speed improvement in what you're already doing, and you can get more bandwidth, you can get more productivity out of your day.
Yes, and when you need to go raise another $500 billion or generate news headlines, that like, oh, we can make you 20% more productive is much less exciting than here's the 44 jobs AI is taking away right now. Because that's essentially what that white paper became, is 5,000 headlines that were something to that effect. So yes, they had what seems like a good research team work on this, but it was also probably dreamt up by the PR team.
Yeah, still good first effort. I think we both want to see some iterations. Do you have any other topics, or do you think we're good for the week?
I think we're good.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching or listening. Until next time.
This has been the Old Guy AI podcast. Views expressed here do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the sponsors or the employers of any hosts or guests.